I'm just trying to see here if the actual stream is live. Okay, I think it is. I'm pretty sure that the stream is live. Ladies and gentlemen, have yourself a refreshment, sit back, relax. Here we are on April 30th, 2024. It is going to be the 6th session of 7 of Lloyd C. Douglas's The Robe. This is book club, and I am Frank, and I'm joined by our esteemed co-host for this book, Stephen Jonathan. It is so great to have you back. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. It's great to be back. Thank you, Frank. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. And you know, this is going to be a particularly great session. And of course, after this, that's it. We're taking it home right now. And there's so many ways where this can go. There's actually a couple of surprises in this little collection of chapters. I can't wait to jump in with you. But I don't know. Do you want to give us some general feelings? And if you want to give us the summary right now, go right ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to give a full summary. I want to say that, if you predict on chapter 19 where everything's going after reading the first 19 chapters, you're probably going to be wrong. And I think that's one of the most delightful things about this book is that what's unfolding in front of us is just nothing I could have dreamed it was. And it's just, it's profound, it's delightful, it's edifying, it's engaging. I'm loving Douglas more and more as a storyteller, but more importantly, he's truly conveying these truths about the nature of conversion. So I'll jump in on chapter 19 and just say this. I loved it when Marcellus came back to Rome at the beginning of chapter 19, and he had recovered himself. And I thought that was just beautiful. He was so recovered. He took his father, shook his hand, gave him a hug, and said, "Father, you're more handsome than ever. I am so proud to be your son." He saw Lucia and said, "Oh, you're more beautiful than ever." He was with the slaves, or the house workers, calling them all by name. He had this wonderful gift that comes with conversion of seeing beyond appearances to the image and likeness of God on souls, and he acted commensurately, and that was totally outside custom, outside his way, outside his being. So I was delighted to watch him not only come back so radically different, but to be accepted. And what was remarkable about that is that Lucia told Demetrius, "Wow, thank you for bringing him back sane and whole." And Demetrius said, "It had nothing to do with me. Right now, Marcellus is his own man. He is in possession of himself. He's back, but the reason he's back is because he gave himself over to Christ. And therefore, the paradox of becoming in possession of yourself really took root. And everybody knew it, but there's a lot more drama to come."
Yes. And so like you said, we have this return to Rome, and it is it seems like a bittersweet affair for everyone outside of Marcellus. People like Marcellus and Demetrius, these characters, like you said, they have complete ownership over themselves right now. They know that even though they're walking into dangerous situations to profess what they feel a need to profess now, 100% with 100% confidence, everybody else where they like to see him walking around healthy, full of zest for life and all that stuff, there, Tiberius, the Gallios, everyone who knew Marcellus was both happy to see him and also extremely disturbed to see what condition he was in as far as the condition of his faith in this so-called dead Galilean, who by the way is not just a subject of distant murmurs anymore. We get all types of confirmation from Tiberius himself even that Christianity has found its way as far out as Rome, and that this was a disquieting phenomenon because it was the type of foe that Rome simply could not dominate militarily, because the threat Christianity posed wasn't military in the first place. For example, at page 402, I think it was over here. Where the heck is it now? 402. Let me see here. So this is between Tiberius and Marcellus. "Fool, do you think he will demolish the Roman Empire?" shouted the old man. "There will be no Roman Empire, your majesty, when Jesus takes command. The empires will have destroyed one another and themselves. He has predicted it. When the world has arrived at complete exhaustion by wars and slaveries, hatreds and betrayals, he will establish his kingdom of goodwill. And then, of course, on page 403, where is it 403 or is it the next? No. It's not. It's 407. It's on 407 when I believe he's talking to Diana, perhaps. I don't know. Yeah, that's it. Says, oh no, Diana is talking to Tiberius, I think, and he's talking about whether or not pretty much more so about what this poses as a threat to the empire. He says, "You mean he will try to overthrow the empire?" Diana asked. "Not by force. If some foolhardy fellow were to stand up on a cart and yell at these captive people to take up arms against their masters, they would know that was hopeless. But here comes a man without an army, that doesn't want an army, has no political aspirations, doesn't want a throne, has no offices to distribute, never fought a battle, never owned a sword, hasn't a thing to recommend him as a leader except," Tiberius lowered his voice to a throaty rumble, "except that he knows how to make blind men see and cripples walk, and having been killed for creating so much excitement, returns from the dead saying, 'Follow me, and I will set you free.'" I mean, when I read that, I'm like, that's one hell of an assessment from Tiberius, because that is that's an incredible threat. You cannot put that down with swords. It's incredible.
That's right. That's right. It's a spiritual threat that Tiberius doesn't recognize as such. He's just threatened. And at the end of chapter 20 right there, I really think it's remarkable that Tiberius is mocking Marcellus for being superstitious. He's making all kinds of comments about, "Oh, you believe in this. Oh, you're crazy. Okay, you're a madman. Okay, you're a liar. I don't believe you." And then he says, "Bring me the robe. Bring me the robe." And he goes, "What miracle is going to happen to me from this robe?" And he's mocking and cajoling and accusing. And then when the robe gets her, he reaches out and pulls back and puts his hand under the covers and says, "Get it away, get it away."
Yes.
So he reveals who's the superstitious one. Tiberius.
I know. Well, expanding on that too, when he was talking with Marcellus and pretty much getting debriefed on his time in Galilee and out there, he would ask for the stories. Marcellus would give him the stories. He'd call him a liar and immediately say, "Continue, though." He's like, "Continue, foolish. This is ridiculous. Tell me more."
You're crazy, but tell me more.
But tell me more. And then that's how what is it? Which chapter was it? With that he's talking about the robe, and then of course orders it away. He reaches out hesitantly to touch it, and then orders it away, wants it gone. So it's like
that's the end of chapter 20, right?
Yeah, that's not, and that's the that part on 407 I just read. That is a description of what he called the movement, this Jesus movement, and how do you fight people who don't have any interest, who already have little interest in possessing anything, let alone an earthly empire. So to the point that we get to the point where Senator Gallio is stressing caution to Marcellus, saying, "Listen, report back everything there is to know about this Jesus, but just don't tell Tiberius that you believe it. You just find ways to just give him what you want without giving too much." But this is something that Marcellus is not willing to compromise on anymore. This is it. And
he can't do it. And in good faith, you see this family dynamic that's tremendously rattled by Jesus, but also edified. And even so, Tiberius is shaken to the core, will dismiss Marcellus as crazy, but is still shaken to the core with fear for the threat to his temporal order. It's really fascinating.
Yes. Let me see here. Then I have here next, page 412. We're moving along, and now it's after Marcellus and Tiberius have had their time together, and now it's Marcellus and Diana, and he's telling Diana everything about it. And you can tell that they genuinely, deeply love each other now. Remember, Diana, in the beginning of the book, those first couple of chapters, Marcellus is kind of like, don't cramp my style. I just, you're cool, but now it's just, there's no pretense there. They really just love each other. But she's concerned for his well-being, like most people in his life. She's scared of ending up with Gaius, If Marcellus falls out of favor with Tiberius and everything else, gets himself killed, who knows? But she's listening to the stories of Jesus with skepticism, but also a great sympathy. Like, she's skeptical as Marcellus is telling her what he really wants to get off his chest, but you can tell that she's not just appeasing him by listening. She's really interested. And of course, her love for Marcellus is another motivating factor for taking this seriously, because she trusts his judgment as well. And I thought it was really interesting, especially for members of this book club. On page 412, that's when he's talking a little bit about Miriam. And,
Right.
and she asked, was she in love with Jesus? And he simply said, yes, everybody was. She said, you know what I mean. He goes, no, I don't think she was, not in that way. But there is that whole idea of being in love. When we had on, it was last January, Stephen, we had kicked off 2023 by reading C.S. Lewis's the Great Divorce.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
there's that one I forget, it might have been one of the married couples, where there is the wife that had died prior to the husband dying, and now he's up there in heaven, and he's going through his trials, and he sees her, and he's trying to pull all those old earthly manipulative tricks on her, but it's not working anymore, and he has some choices to make, and she's telling him how she is in love with God. She's in love right now, and for him, he's thinking about, like, she's fallen for somebody else. But then as a reader, you realize what she's saying is that she's actually immersed in love. Like, I am in, and for God being the source of that love, like, you are in the presence of God, you are in love. So that's why he's saying, I thought it was just so interesting, just having this be a part of a prior book that we had read together, to have him say that, yeah, no, everybody was in love with Jesus. And it wasn't
Yeah.
like that, you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an important point. And Diana, of goodwill and of good faith, I think she's a good person, but she shows you the worldliness of Rome. And then the fact that even though she loves Marcellus and believes him, she still wants to compartmentalize it and reduce his explanations to Roman understandings instead of the fullness of understanding. I think that's fascinating and really well articulated by Douglas here.
Yes, absolutely. So let me see. And hello to everybody in the chat room. I keep peeking in on you. I'm glad that we're all finding the same quotes and excerpts here. So now here is this connection and this pouring out of information that he has with Diana, which makes you think, how far into the fire is she going to be willing to walk with Marcellus? Because I don't know. There's just nothing about this that seems like he's going to get that. The true test of his faith is going to be whether or not he's going to meet his death. And is Diana going to walk into that fire with him? What is it going to be? So, but now Marcellus, can you, because now this is foggy with me with my remembrance, but is Marcellus sent away? Is he banished? He's going back to Rome. What is this that he jumps off of the transport ship and he swims ashore?
Yeah, it's a weird kind of coercion. So everybody's freaked out. But I want to make the point that Diana, being very earthy and down to earth, rightfully describes fallen man. She says, look, you're describing pie in the sky here, Marcellus. You're going to go around with a bunch of weirdos. You're going to lose all your friends. You're going to have, everyone's going to hate you and ridicule and make fun of you for being a crazy person. And that's what Tiberius is saying too. They're all saying this. So they're not hopeless. They threaten him by saying, we will marry Diana off to Gaius. We will do this to you. We'll do that to you. But just get back to Rome. So I think they believe that if they can strip him from his companionship of Demetrius and just send him back to Rome, then maybe those habits will bring him back down to earth. And what's amazing about that is that at Capra, as he's passing the lighthouse, a mile out to sea, he slips off the boat by his own volition and says, I'm going to take this sojourn on the terms that Jesus would have me do it, not on the terms that the secular government of Rome would have me do it. So he slips into the water with all his gold and the robe and everything he needs. It's kind of heavy, and he's contemplating abandoning everything because his father left him a bunch of money. And then he just finds a way to swim all the way to shore, the longest swim he's ever had. And then we go from there into chapter 21, 22.
Yeah. Yes. Now, Demetrius, he was arrested again for fighting. Is he currently in custody right now?
He beat up a Nubian.
Yeah, but he's currently in custody right now, right?
Yes, yeah, because they came to pack up all of his master's stuff, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing with my master's stuff? Don't do that." So he actually knocked into the Nubian out, and they were going to teach him some manners, I guess.
I know, and Quintus is he's going to where Demetrius is. I think
Is he?
I think that I don't forget where Quintus is, because there's a lot of weird things going on right now as far as where I'm trying to keep track of where the characters are geographically, because I still think that Quintus wants to have a final say with Demetrius, but he jumps off of this he's off of this transport ship, and he gives us what I think Marcellus does, what I think is the well, actually, you're talking about the logic of Diana. Here, this is on page 416. "You're dreaming, Marcellus," she sobbed. "You're making a new world out of people and things that don't exist, and you know it. If men would stop fighting, if men would live as your Jesus wants them to, if men would be honest and merciful, then there would be no new world. Or there would be a new world, I should say. No one would be killed. Little children would have enough to eat. Yes, but men are not made that way. Maybe there will come a time when people will stop mistreating one another, and weeds will stop growing, and lions will stop biting, but not in our time. Why shall we make ourselves wretched? Why not accept things as they are? Why throw your life away?" Diana pressed her wet face hard against his shoulder. "Marcellus," she moaned piteously, don't you know you are breaking my heart? Don't you care?" And you know what? It's a very logical plea. You're going to create a world where the weeds don't grow? I mean, there's always going to be problems, and why as an individual are you going to throw away everything, including possibly me? It's very logical. I can't blame her for making that argument. I can't. But to your point before about her, yes.
Yeah, and I don't know if I should make this point, but I remember in my own conversion about 20 years ago that everyone in my life said exactly the same things. That's what I thought was amazing, is that I believe Douglas captured what's universal about conversion. When you say yes to God, when you say yes to the Sermon on the Mount and all the revelation, you are going so much against the world that many people in the world with goodwill will advise you of the opposite. And it's been constant ever since my conversion. So Diana reminds me of the people that I love that are really bummed out that I said yes to Christ. So not to make it too personal, but wow, it was very well articulated.
No, I'm glad you went there. I mean, it makes this. I'm sure that there's somebody, at least a few people in the audience, who probably share that in common with you. I had from here, I had to say, when Marcellus gets off this transport ship, I think he gives us. This opens up what was the most enjoyable chapter of the book for me. His time in Arpino was at the melon farm was the most enjoyable chapter of the book for me. He enters this place completely embodying Christ's demeanor, really living it. We're seeing him really live it now. He's where the workers, when he arrives, the workers at this melon farm, they're unhappy, they're repressed, they're underpaid. The owners, and the owners with all their money, stingy, unhappy. They have bad relationships with their children, with their spouses, and it just give me some general. I have some pages and some whatever, but give me some general thoughts about his time in Arpino at the melon farm.
Absolutely, I'm 100% with you. This chapter was the most delightful chapter where he arrives and he goes up like a fish out of water. He goes there, they see him, "Can you read and write? You're going to be a scrivener." And then he meets Queso, who is just a very small, mean man who through good business amassed a lot of money and has control and power over people. And he meets Queso, puts him in his place, and Queso's absolutely dumbfounded. But Marcellus, with the image of Christ, puts Queso's family back together. His wife's classic. We got to really maybe talk about that if we have time. But but he helps his son and his father reunite. He helps Queso be a man of character that provides a fair wage for his workers, builds that pool, brings everybody together. And the workers and the bosses alike are just utterly moved by his prudence, by his intelligence, by his wisdom, and by his charity. And he ends up becoming a fisher of men in that little place.
Yes.
So much so that everybody wants him to come back when he says he's going to leave. I was just blown away by that chapter. It's so edifying and delightful. And how does he end it? He ends it with the Sermon on the Mount. And if you'll just indulge me for just like 10 seconds, seriously.
Take it.
He made me think when he said, I got this last great thing. Oh, I got to say this first, Frank. I'm just going to jump in and say this. Frank, you're totally vindicated on what you're out of your innocence and out of your goodness. You read Douglas childlike, and you said, I think he's giving that story about the fishes and the loaves from the perspectives of two deformed men who just can't get it. Because on page, what page is that? On page 435, I think it is.
I underlined it.
The last night, one of the last nights he's with them, he's telling about all the miracles. And he says this, Douglas says this. He was, one evening, Antonia and Anthony appeared in the edge of the crowd while Marcellus was telling them about the feeding of the 5,000 people from a small boy's lunch basket.
That's it.
And I love this because I'm like, oh man, Frank was so right.
I got one.
And as a teacher, I always say, don't be skeptical. Don't be a skeptic when you read. Believe the author. And Frank, you did that so beautifully, and I did it so poorly. And I'm super happy now to learn that the author says, yes, it's a miracle from one basket to feeding 5,000.
Yeah.
It's just so beautiful. So I'm super grateful to embarrass myself there, but well done, Frank.
No,
that's awesome.
I don't see it. I don't see it as an embarrassment. There's a few people. There was quite a few people in the reading audience that were saying the same thing. What is this? Is this a tool that is being used to advance the plot and to actually show that there is going to be that there's movement, really positive movement in this character's arc away from cynicism into skepticism and then full belief? Or when I saw that line, I said, boom, there it is. There's the conclusion right there.
Yeah.
So
I loved it. It was a gut punch to my arrogance, and I'm glad about it because God bless Douglas for doing that to me. I'm stoked, and I'm glad you got it right the first time. But the final thing I want to say is this, is that the last night he says, I've got something really special for you guys tomorrow night. And what does he do? He gives them the beatific vision from the Sermon on the Mount. And it made me think of Augustine. Augustine suggests this, and I'm going to quote Augustine on the Sermon on the Mount. He says, anyone who piously and earnestly ponders the Sermon on the Mount, as we read in the Gospel according to Matthew, I believe he will find therein the perfect standard of Christian life. End quote. That's what Augustine says. So he leaves those wonderful people that he brought together in unity in Christ with the ultimate instruction manual on how to live your life. And that's the beatific vision of the Beatitudes properly understood. But don't forget that the world inverts those and doesn't understand them. That's all I wanted to say on that.
That's those wonderful points, and I thought it was so incredible there too, because as you know, you're definitely a lot more well versed in that respect to show where, and also people in the viewing audience that have pointed out where Scripture is being incorporated into the plot here, and for even me, I was like, oh wow, we're getting the Beatitudes. This is great. You know, I remember learning the Beatitudes in 4th grade. And so it was so great to see even that worked in there too. And of course, that's at the end of it. Because what we're seeing at his time in Arpino is that he's, like you said, he changed everybody's lives because he had so much of him, Marcellus, was non-negotiable at this point.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't a warlike stance. It was like it was almost as if there was a storm, an unseen storm that was being waged, that was really running ragged on this melon farm. And he spoke to the storm with a calmness like Jesus did on the Sea of Galilee. And here you see, I mean, there's just so much there. Like, look, the master negotiator that he was on page 427. He said, "You will know, sir, just how much my services are worth. I shall accept what you think is just. Queso says, I gave the last man 10 sesterces and his keep. He says, well, it seems a trifling wage, observed Marcellus, but if you cannot afford to pay more, I was like, that's a great move. If you
Great
can,
line.
that's a great move. Well, if you can't afford to pay more, I understand. Like you may not, you don't have the means.
Yeah, I'll do it, but yeah.
He says, it's not a question of what I can afford, retorted Queso pompously. It's a question of what you will take. He said, I shouldn't have thought that a proud and successful man like you, sir, would want a stranger to donate part of his time to serving you. You called me a beggar an hour ago, in tone indicating that you had no respect for beggars. Perhaps I misunderstood you. So now it comes back down here. He says there'll be no shirking and no mistakes and no. The Queso's doing his normal strong arm stuff. Just a moment, broke Marcellus coolly. Let me tell you something. You have a bad habit of screaming at people. I can't believe that you get any pleasure out of terrorizing others who can't help themselves. It's just a habit, but it's a hateful habit, and I don't like it, and you're not to indulge it when addressing me. And just that, it's not he didn't draw his sword. He's just the calm in the storm. And I'm like, damn. I was like, damn. And another credit to Douglas. He writes every character, and there's quite a few characters in here. He writes all of them with such a distinct and easily identifiable voice that the dialogue flows so great, and everybody is so distinct. Like there's some writers out there where you can tell that it's all coming from the same mind. And they're having a hard time putting that divider in between everybody, and sometimes you can get mixed up. This it reads so well. I mean, I actually see it all in my head. It's wonderful.
It's beautifully written, and the one point I would make to summarize everything you're saying is that St. Paul says this: "Be all things to all men," and chapter 22 embodies in Arpino. It embodies Marcellus being all things to all men. He was a fisher of men in the most beautiful, profound, and magnanimous and honest way, because he didn't compromise one iota of integrity or virtue, but he was all things to all men.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about Queso's wife. What did you think about her character?
I thought she was fabulous. She said, I have an occupation with figuring out Queso, but even Marcellus's insight into Queso, she had no idea about her. So she was saying, in the Roman material world, I get Queso, and she was right. She said, if you don't tell Queso that you're a senator's son, you will rob him of the pleasure he desires. And she's talking about the mean, worldly Queso. But even Marcellus, who had never met them before, knew Queso more deeply than Antonia did. But I thought Antonia was a good wife. She's a loving mother, loving wife, and just kind of playing the role. So I really admired her. I liked her a lot.
Oh, yeah. And as far as knowing him deeply, again, that's I think on page 427. Nobody's ever dared talk to me like that, Queso smoldered. I don't know why I let you do it. I'll gladly tell you. Marcellus laid his hands flat on the desk and leaned far forward with a confidential smile. You have accumulated a great deal of property and power, but you are not contented. There is something you lack, something you would like to have. You are not sure of what it is, but you think I know. This is why you sent me for me to come back, Queso. Mm-hmm. And then because what you see from there, aside from those interchanges with his wife, is I think a really, really awesome moment with Queso's son Antony. To see this kind of like rudderless artistic type. He's trying to find his way in the world, but he doesn't have doesn't have the confidence or the support from his father. A really, really nice scene on page 432 as Marcellus is asking Antony about his paintings and the characters in the paintings and insight into what will give them depth and what will give the art more dimension and all that stuff. Just care. And then I also love I just love through his advocation, Marcellus's advocation of paying people better, giving them swimming pools. Everyone became happier, more productive. The melons were in better shape. Queso, the relationship he had with his son was improving. You really just see. I also love that part of all of that was Marcellus insisting that people thought knew that the wages were being raised by Queso, not by him. That the pools were being built by Queso, not taking credit, but caring more about people seeing the impacts that their kindness is making, and how not only it's good, it's better for the overall output, but you start finding that contentment that you were not getting with a few extra, shekels in your bank account. It was it's just awesome. I think that toward the end of that chapter, Stephen, it reminded me of Ebenezer Scrooge on Christmas Day toward the end. And
Exactly.
it felt so good.
Great analogy. Yeah, and he brought culture to them by saying, "I'm introducing you to the greatest soul that's ever walked the earth." Told them the stories. Those stories became the soul of that community. This is the fullness of the soul of the community. It's that the increase in money came from that charity that came from discovering truth, not from just a material gain. It was really beautifully done.
Yeah,
Very beautiful.
and of course, the preaching that's and it of course ends with the Sermon on the Mount. They only became that receptive because here it is. You show up at somebody's doorstep, you knock on the door, and you start asking, giving them brochures, asking if they want to, join your congregation or whatever the hell it is. It's one thing to go door to door and give people brochures. It's another thing to inject yourself into a situation, and through indomitable spirit alone, everybody's life around you changes, that you become a gravity well of joy and progress and brotherhood. That's the kind of thing that makes people curious about what made you who you are. So once he's got people hooked like this, then he could just talk about the things that changed his life at night. And all of a sudden, by merit of people just wanting to capture a little bit of that grace for themselves, it makes them so much more open. And I love that last one of those last lines, when Marcellus is saying that he has to leave, and Queso asks, "Aren't you contented, Marcellus?" And he says, "Yes, and that's why I must leave."
Yeah,
and that's
so
else.
good.
Yeah, it's so good. I just love it.
It is so good. Yeah, this was the most delightful week I've had, and I disciplined myself and didn't read past the chapters, so I don't know what's coming next.
Good.
And I'm glad of it.
Good, because that's it. It's chapter 23 to the end, and I think it's another 66 pages. Let's get to these wonderful comments here. All right.
Absolutely.
There we go. First one up. Let's see. Is it Waylon Jennings again? No, it's Heather Peets. Heather said, "I find it curious that Douglas seems to ignore or deny Christ's ascension. For instance, on page 439, Marcellus is asked where Jesus is now and replies, 'No one knows. He might appear anywhere, anytime.' This doesn't seem to be speaking of Christ's return as described in Scripture, but rather a strange idea that Jesus could continue to appear here and there as he did between his resurrection and ascension. I'm not sure what to make of Douglas's theology." This, again, is partly attributed for me the same way I approached the 5,000, the feeding of the 5,000. I mean, the Bible wasn't put together yet. We're talking about a year after. This is a bunch of people who were there to see so much of this happen in person, that are having these experiences and are piecing together what they have seen for themselves. But there's nothing that's been codified yet, and they don't really. I can't expect these characters to be able to have what we have now accepted as the truth of the ascension and the timelines in heaven and Jesus's mission after the crucifixion. So I don't know. I think that's I think that's just Douglas humanizing the people who are trying to make sense of one of the greatest stories ever told.
Yeah, and I think Heather brings up a really good question, and I'm not entirely clear on when this is, but we can remember that not only was Christ present before the ascension, physically with the apostles and with people, but also afterwards. I think it was after that he came to St. Paul and said, "St. Paul, why are you persecuting me?" And Christ comes to all of us in that way, from his ascension to the present day. And that's a hard thing to categorize. So I do think it's a really good question, and it's worth asking. What is Douglas saying here? I do believe this is before St. Paul's conversion, isn't it? All
I
this right now?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I
It's
don't
my
know.
guess because he just met Saul of Tarsus. He met him there, and Saul was, included in the killing Stephanus, by stoning him. So, but it is a good question because we want to know, how is it that Jesus comes to us? It's different before the crucifixion. It's different before the ascension. And now, believe it or not, Christ comes to all of us. And what we lack today is receptivity. We've been conditioned out of it because we're like Diana and the Romans. We just don't know how to open ourselves up to that which is beyond the material.
Jalen Wennings, number 2 to this week, said, ever since Marcellus was ordered to go back to Jerusalem, I had wondered what news of Jesus had already made it to Rome. And to my amazement, Christianity had already made its way to the Gallio home with the slaves. It even beat Demetrius there. The word travels fast. Wish I had more of this, more for this session, but I'm fighting off a head cold and got some brain fog. You've given enough, Jalen. Don't worry about it. That's NJSF responded to that and said one should not underestimate the amount of trade in the Mediterranean already at that time. Because of the easiness of travel and communication, we have a bias on how much worse the communication and travel would have been. I know you're talking about the epicenter of the known world. The Holy Land is still right there in the Mediterranean. I mean, you are just a couple of that's it. The Mediterranean was the world. And so you can't discount that. Word travels fast. It only take a couple of days. So let me see here. Gal 2021 says Douglas seems to emphasize social change being the desired outcome of Jesus' death on the cross and how that and his resurrection impacted people. Social change rarely produces spiritual change. Individual spiritual change can lead to social change and improvement. The character of Tiberius is used to foretell the future of the way and Christianity. Page 408, the problems that would come with the growth and how the true army would travel on foot if expected to accomplish anything. I think this points to what believers are reminded of, i.e. that their citizenship is in heaven and they are sojourners here. Marcellus's jumping into the water could be in some ways symbolic of baptism.
Sure.
That's great insight.
Really deep.
Ritual cleansing and a final break from the past. He went into the water because he wanted to avoid Rome. By the time that he left Arpino, he was inexorably being drawn to Rome. Page 440, he did not know why he was headed toward Rome, but the reason would appear in due time. It was almost as if he were being led about by an invisible hand, end quote. Marcellus' surrender seems complete here. Demetrius, the friend that sticks closer than a brother, made me think of Samwise Gamgee. Absolutely. Good one.
Was all that Gal 2021?
Yeah.
Oh, such good things. I want to comment on one thing. I too was wondering, it almost seemed like Douglas put a little bit of an emphasis on the social gospel, where I would have put an emphasis on the spiritual gospel. Maybe Gal's saying the same thing. I'd wondered about that too, because like Diana said, there's no fixing fallen man other than through baptism and reconciliation to Christ. So it is weird that it would turn into maybe even a hope or a discussion of social justice. And I'm not sure that's what was happening, but I do appreciate the point.
I think that's the way I took it, the way she wrote it. I think that's I think that's what they're saying, that to say social change would come before the spiritual is, no, it's like you would have to start there and it would trickle down, because that's the only thing that can actually take hold. Social change that is as I don't know, as lasting as any fad, fad diets or anything like that. Social change comes and goes. Spiritual change, that's something that that's a hard sell to switch off. All right, see,
that's right. Can I make one more comment? I'm sorry, Frank.
No,
interrupt. It's so right. I mean, Gal's got it just right. Is that from the spiritual change, and to Douglas's credit, we got that completely from chapter 22, where Marcellus is the agent of spiritual change and the society there changed. And in the modern world, there's all this emphasis on changing the structures and the laws, and as if that leads to something, and it absolutely does not. It just leads to more deterioration. So if we don't convert and become spiritually citizens of the city of God, nothing will get better socially. And Gal's just right, and you got it right too. Thank you.
Hey, please jump in as much as possible. I mean, you're the big attraction here. Yeah. Well, listen, especially since this is your job too. This is I love these deep dives. Robert Solario said, pages 382 to 383, back to the Good Samaritan. In a conversation with Marsipor and Demetrius, they say, let us not make the mistake of thinking that this message of Jesus concerns peace and goodwill. It is a soft and timid thing. Scurry off the road to hide in the bushes until all other things go by. People who carry this torch already being whipped and imprisoned. Many have been slain, end quote. I think the path Demetrius follows will be far different than Marcellus. In what? Oh, I wish Robert was here to say in which way. How do you think? Do you understand? Where do you think that could bear out to be true in the last couple of chapters, Stephen? Where Demetrius's path is going to be different than Marcellus? Do you think one will live and one will die?
I think both will live eternally. And what you're saying is, I'll take the high road, you take the low road. I think it's a great question. And Demetrius himself has already been a fisher of men in a radically different way than Marcellus. Marcellus being a patrician, Marcellus being the senator's son. It's just radically different. And I love how beautiful it is that they're both living out the same reality, and it's radically different. So I think that's a great question. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know what's going to happen. Live or die, they're both going to live eternally, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think both have much less regard for the temporal life than they do for the eternal life.
Mark G says the entire chapter with Marcellus in the melon grove was such a joy to read. I'm glad. It just stuck out. I mean, it's great. And then, and again, like I said, when we were talking about those first couple of chapters where we're there with Demetrius in the crowd as he's seeing Jesus come in on the donkey on Palm Sunday, I said it's just crazy where on Holy Thursday, when you say, all right, well, this is the night that Jesus is arrested, and it was on Good Friday that Demetrius is he's going around town. It's that night. It's actually late Thursday going into Friday, and he's just in Jerusalem around there, and there is just some word getting around that guy from the lonely man on the donkey had been arrested that night. And just to think that somewhere in the city, Jesus is being taken from one place to the next, to Herod, to Pilate, this and that, and that whole kangaroo court is going on. And I'm saying that I feel like that even though I'm sitting here in my couch in my living room, I can get myself in these dusty old streets, smelling leather and rotten food and all that stuff. I can just put myself there. I was in this melon grove, Stephen. Some books are just easier to just get yourself there than others, and every step along the way, I've been able to just sink into the setting here, into all of the the background, and just be a part of the setting and the scenery. So that's been something I like. Yeah, Marcellus's way of evangelizing through action and slowly changing behaviors before explaining the life of Jesus is certainly a contrast to the more in-your-face evangelizing that can sometimes take place. Like I was saying, it's one thing to knock on a door and give somebody a pamphlet. It's one thing to change an entire community and have them wonder, where does this, tell us what comprises this incredible energy that you're giving off right now. Tell us about what happened to you. When a person can build relationships and true goodwill with a group of people, they may be more willing to receive a message from that person. Marcellus uses a "you can catch more flies with honey" approach here, and my prediction would be that this story ends in martyrdom for Marcellus, and the last experience in the melon grove was the author's way of showing exactly how Marcellus, and maybe the author himself, interpreted Jesus' message and wanted to go about spreading the word. I haven't read ahead or seen the movie, so I could be completely off on that. What do you think, Stephen?
I'm guessing the same thing, and I don't know because I won't move ahead and I won't watch the movie. I'm just too enthralled in this moment. But what's brought up that's really important right here is this being all things to all men. You know, those people going and knocking on doors, they have the pamphlets and the spiel, and their inverted order of reality says, if we just do this, we'll fish and catch a few people. Marcellus is exactly the contrary, inverted, that says, every person I meet is made in the image and likeness of God, and what it is that they need is unique. And he's going to read that. And that's what we're called to do. It's horrible to treat people as if we don't know them. And when we do that, we treat them in a corporate, in an overarching way. And that's not the way to be a fisher of men. So I think Marcellus is the perfect example of the fisher of men as a disciple of Christ, because everyone he encounters, he deals with them as they are, not as he thinks they ought to be. So this is a beautiful contrast between corporate America and corporate education and corporate politics and news media and all this other garbage, and the fisher of men who says, I don't care about results. I care about the person I'm talking to, because they're made in the image and likeness of God. And I think it's so beautifully done.
Yeah. Here are a few points from NJSF. He says, it was a smooth yet impactful read for this session. Marcellus completes his journey into apostleship, having to process renouncing fully his old life in the midst of temptation of easy life and love that Tiberius and Diana made, to fully evangelize in Arpino. Demetrius was much less prominent in this time. An overarching theme is the contrast of Jesus' teachings and the value of society of the time. I must confess, I was a bit disappointed, and I'm glad he brings this up. I was a bit disappointed by the news of Prince Gaius.
Yeah.
His death at the end, which I believe to be Caligula. I felt like a deus ex machina, so that maybe Marcellus and Diana may end up together after all. But then again, as Marcellus noted when leaving Arpino back to Rome, he's being led by the Holy Spirit and is now free. Stephen, when I read that Gaius has been killed, and of course there is a big hubbub about who is responsible for it. It's a big twist right there. Who's responsible? Yeah. I thought Tiberius would be the one to die, and Gaius would take proper revenge on the Gallios by rising to power. But now Gaius is gone, and everyone is suspecting foul play. They also believe that Marcellus drowned himself a few weeks prior when he jumped off that boat. So we've got a situation of who done it, where's Demetrius, and is Tiberius going to be the one to sentence somebody to death? You think that he would just cast somebody off? But
I thought the same thing. I thought, well, Gaius is dead. I'm thinking, and I don't even know, Quintus poisoned him.
I'm thinking,
right? He finds out about the affair. His wife's horrendous. So is Gaius. So is Quintus. Everyone's horrendous. Why not just kill the guy? So we're going to find out, I think, very shortly, aren't we? But I don't know either.
Yeah. Absolutely. One statement from Tiberius resonated with me, given the current developments in the Vatican, even if it's something that has happened before, as many reformations are in history books. Here's the quote. The way it seems to be going now, nothing could stop it, but it won't go on that way. It will collapse after a while. Soon as it gets into a strong position, soon as it gets strong enough to dictate terms, then it will squabble over its offices and spoils and grow heady with power and territory. Absolutely. I mean, yeah. You just talk
every
about
time.
Every time. It doesn't matter if it's a car company, or if it's a church. Every time.
Or if it's a family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marcellus arrived home a changed man. It was clear to the family that he had been transformed for the better. It was also interesting to see how the word traveled so fast. Clear from the exchange between Demetrius and Marcipor, however, should not be so surprised, since there was a lot of trade, especially on the Mediterranean. The most striking comment from Demetrius was while talking with Lucia about Jesus. He said, they had it from an eyewitness on many astounding miracles. One Philip. Let me see here. The first big test for Marcellus was the conversation with his father, where he fully attested to his faith despite his fears. The most striking exchange is when he almost affirmed his belief in the eternal life. And, I mean, there's a lot here. For a moment, he debated the advisability of telling his father about the miracle he had seen with his own eyes, Peter's healing of the cripple. But no, that would be too much. In sober truth, sir, I do not fear death. There is a life to come. The only trouble with that dream is that it lacks proof. Nobody has ever signaled us from out there. Nobody has ever come back to report. Jesus did, declared Marcellus. I mean, there's no bigger diving board you can jump off of
That's
than
the
that.
biggest.
That's the biggest one, you know?
That's the one.
So it's just a, and then when you read that again, those little things where he is right now as a character, it's great to see that he's, references this feeding of the 5,000 from the one boy's basket. But
Yes.
even without that, to see that declaration, then what does multiplying fish mean to raising yourself from the dead?
Yeah. Nothing. Right.
Nothing.
Right.
The conversation with Emperor Tiberius went from funny to evil once Tiberius put Marcellus's faith to the test with the Jesus or Diana choice.
Yeah.
One has to appreciate the honesty and steadfastness of Marcellus on the conversations with both Diana and Tiberius. And then toward the end, it was a tender scene between Diana and Marcellus, where the choice was made clear. Such a loving scene, and ending in a note of hope. And Diana said that she did believe. Like I said, there was skepticism there, but I really do believe that she was, especially because she loves him. She gave herself over to it. She was sincere in her interest.
I think so, but then you're still saying, but now will you jump off this cliff in total faith? And she's like, I believe, but I'm not jumping off the cliff.
Yeah.
Not yet.
I know. And then here we go. The most beautiful exchange was when being hired by Queso, hinting that he would convert him. And then here we said here, I'll gladly tell you, Marcellus laid his hands on the table. You have accumulated a great deal of property and power, but you are not contented. There's something you lack, something you would like to have. You're not sure what it is, but you think I know. That's why you sent for me to come back, Queso. So it's, I'm glad we're all seeing it, of course. And now the last one here is from Dyslexic Angel. It says, this book has been like receiving a warm embrace at the end of my day, and this section of pages tied into my reading of the Ecclesiastes. For me, there were so many points that hit home and tied into the reading of that particular book in the Bible. The song Dust in the Wind by Kansas played like a soundtrack in my head while reading. The first thing I was struck by was this. I was profoundly struck by the conversation between Tiberius and Marcellus, and in particular, when Tiberius demanded to know if Jesus was so great and was producing miracles. Quote, why then did he let them put him to death? Marcellus's response brought tears to my eyes. He said, Your Majesty, well versed in various religions, will remember that among the Jews it is customary to make a blood offering for crimes. It is believed that the Galilean offered himself as an atonement gift. What crimes had he committed? Asked Tiberius. None, sire. He was atoning for the sins of the world. It's big. That's a big
huge
one. Yeah.
And what does he say after that? Tiberius horrendously says, oh, that's clever. Oh, that's a clever gimmick.
Yeah. Yeah. For all men, he said, yes.
Yeah.
So why are they so afraid of him? They were relentless. This is Dyslexic Angel again. They were relentless in their pursuit of him, and they have and to have him pay for a crime where none had taken place. For me, on page 386 and 387, and the only conclusion I can draw is those who believe are considered brave souls because they have nothing to fear, and those who are not afraid are not as easy to control. When Marcellus was talking to Diana, and what a difficult conversation that must have been, and his earnestness with what he saw as the significance of Jesus and what he brought to his believers, Jesus brings hope. He says, quote, Marcellus explains, for thousands of years, the common people of the world, the whole world, had lived without hope of anything better than drudgery, slavery, and starvation. Always the rapacious rulers of some empires were murdering and pillaging the helpless. They may still wear chains on their wrists, Diana, but not on their souls. And let me see here. A couple more things from Angel said, I love the humility of Marcellus and his journey to get there, his willingness to work in the melon field, and his grace in working for exactly what he needed. Purpose, food, lodging, and the ability to appreciate the world around him while he contributed to the livelihood of someone else. The view of the mountain. That was good enough.
Mm.
but of course he was bringing those negotiating tactics. He was the talk about the day laborers in Galilee when he was talking about them, about setting the price for the day. You know, what do you do? He was actually putting all of that, those parables, into practice and seeing how it was remaking the entire economy. It wasn't even just making people happier and the output more fruitful, and everybody just there was just more enjoyment in life. But again, we were talking about economy a couple of sessions ago. He remade a local economy in a couple of weeks. Just incredible stuff. And here's the
Beautiful.
last one. The best narrative for me in this reading has been the thread of truth. This beautiful fiction story peppered with truth, real life events that carry us along like a leaf on a creek. There are so many examples of the liberating power of truth telling, and my favorite innocent example in its conversations between Anthony and Marcellus. I am experiencing a little anxiety because I do not want the story to end. I have loved this book I have loved this book the most so far. And that's the end of our comments today.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Who said that?
That is from Dyslexic Angel.
Oh, Dyslexic Angel. She's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, been a lot of great stuff here, and I can't wait to see what. I hope everybody who has not taken the plunge and putting some thoughts in for next week, make sure I'll put up the thread earlier. Maybe I'll put it up tomorrow, so you have a whole week to put in on that. But next Monday, that is the 6th of May. That is the 7th and final session. And it's serious. It's easy. Just finish the book, and we will be back here for that. Stephen, any closing parting shots? Go right ahead.
I'm just enthralled by how much fun this is. I'm really glad I controlled myself and didn't go past, because right now there's so much I'm looking forward to for the last 3 chapters. And Frank, I'm just grateful you put this together, because if it weren't for you, I'd never even know about this book. To be honest, you brought it to me. I read the first chapter. I'm like, yeah, I'm in, and let's do it. And so I'm super grateful, not just to you, but to the audience who seems in it, hook, line, and sinker, heart and soul. And so I'm just super grateful, and I'm pumped about next week. So thank you for everything.
I hope that it shows up in some of your reading lists and curriculums, that you do this with some of your students. I think that they would get a kick out of it, especially with you leading it, because you obviously, I knew that I would be learning a lot with you in tow, just because, I mean, you've brought out so many Easter eggs and things that are scriptural that I'm just not I'm not attuned to spotting myself just yet. So it's been great. And the other thing I'd really, and I'll probably mention this again next week when we have the whole story now under our belt, but I would love for somebody to do a faithful mini series bringing this book to life. So, like, faithful to the source material, mini series, maybe 5 60-minute episodes. I would love for somebody to do this right, because I'll watch the movie again after I'm done reading the book, but I'll tell you, I don't know what the conclusion is going to be, but everything along the way, it is so vastly different from the movie. I mean, you
So
can
vastly different. Yeah.
and
I watched the first half of the movie, and it's so different. We need 7 episodes.
at least, yeah, 5 to 7 episodes, at least an hour long each. And I understand what you're saying by saying, hey, look, what are you going to do? You can't make this a 5-hour long movie with intermissions like those old biblical films from the 50s and 60s. But
That's right.
On the other hand, there was so much needlessly changed with the movie. It boggles my mind. So I can't wait to see how this ends, because I remember the end scene in the movie, and I don't even know if it's going to be. I don't know if it's possible to lead us in that direction. I don't know, but it's so much infinitely better, this book, and I hope that somebody has the presence of mind to do a faithful reproduction of it in a miniseries format.
It'd be gold. I can't agree more.
Okay, well, listen, Stephen Jonathan, thank you so much. Everybody, I hope you know that Stephen Jonathan's link has been in all of the episodes' descriptions. Go and check them out. We'll see you next Monday, the 6th of May, 9 o'clock, right here for the conclusion of the Robe. Thanks again, Stephen.
Thank you, Frank. God bless you all.
God bless. Take care. There you go. All right. So let me just go into the chat room real quick. See everybody. Laura, thank you. The movie was nothing like the book, said Laura. I said, I know. I mean, I know. I said, I know. I know. And I thought that I always really enjoyed the movie, but I had no clue. I had no clue. The one thing I wish was in the book, that's not in the book, but is in the movie, is Demetrius in the movie actually crosses paths with Judas. I think I mentioned that with to Stephen in either last session or the session before. That's the one thing so far from the movie I wish was in the book. Everything else, I don't understand a lot of the decision making. So, Frank, can you make a playlist of the book club movies? You mean all the book clubs, all the books that we've done with the movies in it? With the have movies? Well, they haven't done Lucifer's Hammer. There's The Robe. There's The Godfather. There is Neverending Story. That'll be in August. But moving backwards, there's no Windswept House. That would be an interesting thriller. January of 2023 was Great Divorce. Nobody's done that. Brave New World. I think Brave New World has been done. I haven't seen it, but I think Brave New World has been done. Field of Dreams. That's Shoeless Joe. Field of Dreams. That is one of those things where there's so much in the book that is gorgeous. First two chapters of Field of Dreams is a complete book and a complete short story in itself. I was moved to tears. Okay, in private, for the first two chapters of that book. It's just gorgeous. And of course, Field of Dreams is as a movie fantastic. I think the liberties that they took with the movie was amazing. It was interchangeable. I actually think I liked the movie a little bit better in some respects than the book. So there's a movie right there. And then Devil in the White City last August, it does not have a movie yet, but I heard that the rights to make the movie has been purchased, or it's like in the possession of like a Scorsese DiCaprio kind of a duo. I can see Scorsese doing something like that and making DiCaprio the I don't know, Mr. Mudgett. So anyhow, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for being a part of this. And next week, we wrap this one up. Happy reading, my friends. Happy reading.